This is Josh and Josh from Revisionist, and you're listening to our chapter of As the Story Grows.
Welcome to the next chapter of As the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. This week, Josh Barbee and Josh Peavey from hardcore outfit Revisionist joined the podcast. Josh Barbee and I got connected on Facebook, and I was already a fan of the band's new EP, The Emptiness Of Gravity, which I had received from a PR outfit, and planned on inviting the band on the podcast to chat about the album anyways. The Joshes talk about the collaborative nature of the band that makes Revisionist an ego-free band, how working with Aaron Gillespie shaped the songs on the new EP, and wanting to bring community and camaraderie back into hardcore. This was a great chat, and I hope everyone enjoys getting to know Josh and Josh from Revisionist. How are you guys doing today?
I'm great. We just finished up doing some cool stuff. Can't say a whole lot about it, but it's
we spent all day in this. We spent all day in the studio working on a bunch of drum and guitar playthroughs. There's a good friend of ours in town, Jason Catlett, owns a studio called Magnitude Creative. Nice. And then he has a band that's in there working, but they've got a drummer that's it looks like he's going to take like a little break from the band. So Josh went in and did a bunch of drum tracking for him, and then we tracked out a bunch of stuff to help go along with this EP release.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So are both of you guys from Oklahoma originally?
Kansas.
Yep. Kansas. That's right. Yes, Wichita.
We're in Wichita.
That's right. My bad. Kansas.
No, you're good.
It's all the same.
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Wichita whole life. I never really lived anywhere else. I've been a bunch of different places, but Wichita's home. So
rad. What got each of you into music?
So I'm the old guy in the band. I remember it was like years ago growing up, and I grew up like an hour from Lawrence.
Okay. And
so I got to expose to some things like bands like Cool S as a kid. And then there's my first kind of, I lived in a small town. I'm not from Wichita.
Okay.
I'm from like an hour north of here. And there used to be a venue in Kansas City called the New Earth Coffee House. I remember, I got to see like Living Sacrifice play there. And I don't know if you remember Still Breathing, that Solid State band. And so I was like a total like geeky fanboy when I was like a little kid I was like middle school, high school, whatever. And the Still Breathing, I ended up seeing them a handful of times, and they like their guitarist Bob, who actually I'm still friends with today. But like he did a lot of like mentoring just because I think I was a kid that wouldn't go away.
Yeah.
Like I was just at every show, and then we found out they live in Oklahoma, so I was like 2 hours from them, and they invited me to like a Thanksgiving dinner one time, and then I went and spent like a weekend, and I was in this terrible band that we did a battle of the bands, and he brought me his guitar rig to use. So it was like little neat, like they were like he's like an awesome dude, and so I think it instilled my first like real love of music with someone. I probably wouldn't still play if I didn't have a couple mentors that kind of like showed me behind the curtain a little bit and like got me interested. So, sorry, it's my neighbor's big truck back in that.
It's okay.
I was wondering what that was. For me, I've told this story to a few people, but I was in a youth group growing up. Grew up pretty religious. My parents were, and so the youth pastor at that church, I was probably 9 or 10, something like that. And he was just this real big dude, neck tattoos, big old beard. He looked just crazy, you know. I was like, oh man, this dude looks super cool. And so he asked me if I wanted to learn how to play bass because they were going to start a youth group band. So I said, okay. And I remember he had the As I Lay Dying, Frail Words Collapse pen on his bass strap. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And, you know, I'm a little kid. And I was like, what is that? And he pulls out like a broken Jewel disc, the Frail Words Collapse CD. And then he pulled out Shouters Our Security, those 2 records. And he handed them to me. And he was like, hey, like your parents are pretty strict about, you know, you listening to Christian music and stuff. They're a Christian band. So go check it out. Like, see what you think. So I remember taking it home and listening to it, and I did not know what to think of it. I was like, what the hell is happening right now? Because, you know, like growing up for me, it was all like, you know, Christian radio stations, Michael W. Smith, that kind of thing. So hearing that like opened my eyes to a whole other genre and subgenres and whatever you want to call it, you know? And so it was interesting because at first I was like, I don't know if I like this or love it or hate it, you know, but I just kept digging and digging. And so finding out about bands and stuff, I would just, you know, open up the booklet and read the thank yous and stuff. I really love those copies and the physical copies and stuff. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's how I found out about music. And, you know, all these records that I grew up on, just, I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. You know, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I will do it, you know, and we'll just figure it out along the way.
That's awesome. What led you to transition from like playing bass in the youth group band to being a drummer?
So that's
Josh probably isn't any good at bass.
So yeah, I really enjoyed playing bass when I first started learning. And the youth pastor who introduced me to all that stuff, his name was Justin, and his wife Esther was a drummer. And she would just do very simple stuff as a church drummer. So, you know, like 4/4, straight beat, whatever. And I was like, those look really fun. And they had this ridiculous, like 12-piece drum set, you know, just like super small church, but ridiculous drums, you know. And I was like, that looks like a jungle gym that I want to climb on. It looks awesome. And so she showed me a straight beat, and I just never wanted to leave playing drums, you know. So just kept practicing, and terrible, still not amazing right now, but it's still, you know, still a work in progress. But it was just the one thing that playing that, I don't know, it was just a connection, you know, that I never wanted to give up.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Josh Barbee, you said you had a band in high school or junior high that you did a battle of the bands for. What was your band trajectory through high school? And
well, I also started learning actually in my youth group growing up.
Yeah.
And I still am. I really have no business playing guitar in a band, if I'm being honest. But I remember being on I was like a Taco Bell youth, like at a youth trip, like at a Taco Bell, and my parents had bought me this like cheap guitar from like the JCPenney catalog that I owned. I couldn't play it, but like, you know, well, I have a guitar, so I'm neat. And I was probably in middle school, maybe I was a little bit younger than that, but I was like bragging about like, I don't even know if it was like I play guitar, but it was like, yeah, I've got a guitar. And the worship leader overheard it and was like, oh, you play guitar? Well, we need someone to play bass at church. So I guess I'm gonna have you start playing bass. And like being like younger, you're already a little like arrogant and like full of yourself. So it's like, yeah, like, oh yeah, sure. And man, I remember like he would like make me show up like the day before, like on Tuesdays before youth group after I got out of school, and he would like play piano and yell letters over his shoulder at me for the notes that I was supposed to play. And then he would do that sometimes at like during the like during youth group, like during the stuff. And but like that's how I learned to play guitar, because I finally got to where like I knew what the notes were, and I would watch the acoustic guitar player and like making chords, and I'm like, well, if I'm playing this is what that letter has to be also. And so like, so that's really how I learned. And then a guy who later ended up being the youth leader of our church, or the music pastor or whatever, he actually he was a little bit older than us and was into like Project 86 and some like other kind of cool, like slightly heavier bands. Mm-hmm. And being in a small town, I convinced him to be in a band with me.
Nice.
And so we did like, I mean, we like played out, we like did some regional stuff over time. The band was like some weird mix of like new metal mixed with like trying to be like Living Sacrifice, and it was terrible. He's actually still an artist that actually he works with was it Praiser, the like the online, like the radio station like app or whatever. He still works for them and does music, and he's awesome. But so it was like a band that you just make do because you live in a small town, and like all of us as musicians probably didn't even vibe together because we just like, well, you play, so let's do it. Yeah. So
that's awesome. What about you, other Josh?
Yeah, so I've been in quite a few bands, but none of them were ever heavy bands.
Okay.
It was always like, indie rock stuff, but it was kind of the same thing with Josh, where, I couldn't find anybody who was into the stuff that I was into. And all the people that I knew who played an instrument, they were like, oh man, the Killers are my favorite band. And I'm like, oh, I like that band. And then they would show me all these songs, and I was like, oh, this is just like a Killers cover band. And I was like, but I can't find anybody else to play with, so I'll play, And so I was playing drums in all those bands and stuff. And the first heavy band I was ever in was a band in Kansas City, and I ended up doing vocals in that band because a buddy of mine, he was the drummer, and he was like, dude, you should just come and try out for vocals, because our vocalist is quitting. He's about to have a kid and stuff. And I was like, man, I can't do that. Like, I'm not a vocalist. Like, I'm a drummer, And so I went and had fun, just tried out whatever, didn't think anything of it. And they're just like, oh yeah, do you want to join? And I was like, I mean, if you want me to,
my
then sure.
Opportunity to do something.
Yeah. And I was like, it seemed like fun. Like that he's my buddy who's playing drums, and I like the other dude. So like, we'll see kind of where it goes. And so did that for maybe a year, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, something like that. And we ended up playing a show with Revisionist before I joined here in Wichita. And was that the first time I met you in person, Josh?
Yeah, well, you came to that Norma Jean show that we played, but I don't think we met.
Okay. So I think that might have been the first time that I actually met Josh. Yeah.
Nice.
Was when our bands played together. And I don't know if it was at that show or online or something, but you asked me if I wanted to do vocals in the band. And I was like, dude, I don't even want to do vocals in my band. Like, I just want to play drums, And so you're like, well, can you play guitar?
I think before you joined that band, I had hit you up about possibly filling in for a tour that we had on drums. And you were like, dude, I don't even like own like a double kick pedal. And then I think you blew me off. Like, you were just like, oh, like, yeah, we'll see. And then
I think I probably did because Jake hit me up about doing that other band. Yeah.
That's so funny.
So I think that's probably what that was. But yeah. Well, and then I remember you asking if I wanted to play guitar, if I could play guitar. And I remember the only reason that I could kind of play guitar is because the same reason I was in all those other indie rock bands was because I could never find anybody who wanted to do something that I wanted to do. So I just had to learn how to try to write riffs, Yeah. And I was like, oh, like I could play a little bit. If you show me the guitar parts and the record or whatever, then I'll play. So I ended up joining Revisionist playing guitar.
Oh, yeah. His actual last show on guitar was we actually did the Living Sacrifice, one of those reunion shows in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Okay.
Back like November, like right before the pandemic hit.
And we had
like we had one more local show in December, and our drummer at the time was terrible with scheduling and being like with like remembering stuff. And we had a show booked, and he kept saying the week of was like, oh, it's this day, right? And we were like, no, that look at you have a cell phone in your pocket, like look at the calendar. Like he knew the date, but he had the day wrong.
Yeah.
And so Josh that whole week was like, he's probably not going to show up to the show. And so Josh learned the whole set on drums that week. And we went to the day, like up to the show playing, and he was like, all right, guess I'm going to play drums. And so we played a show as a 4-piece with him playing drums, and that's how he became the drummer.
Wow.
Yeah.
So show must go on. I don't know, like canceling shows is not our thing. So you just figure it out.
We've also always been the band to always just figure something out, like situations like that, or, we've had blown tires going to shows, and, it's like we'll figure it out. We'll pull over in a small town, try to get it fixed, do whatever we can to not miss a show. We
also got a handful of friends that have been taught like basing guitar parts.
Yeah.
Just like, so because our bass player is in another like this cool like math rock band called Old News.
Okay.
And so they were pretty active earlier on when he was in the band, and so sometimes he was like, I can't play the show because I have a conflicting show, and we're like a really easygoing band, so it's just like, oh, well, we got like 5 or 6 friends that are always around, and so we just taught other people parts. And so there's a handful of shows you'll see every now and then, like different people in videos.
Oh,
and it's just because we have friends that are like, like they get to have fun for the night and play, and nobody's gets offended that somebody's playing their parts for the day. So
can you talk about the genesis of Revisionist?
So I started the band.
Okay.
I used to play, I was in a band called the Gentleman Homicide. It was on Blood Ink Records like years ago, from Texas. I moved to Arkansas to play in a band called Take It Back, and it ended up not working out. And I was like, I'd sold like all my gear. I was like, I don't even want to play music anymore.
Oh man.
And I had a sick mom, so I moved back to my hometown to like help take care of family. And I realized that like it was like the only thing that kind of like was like my therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always played because it was like a release. It was something that actually mattered to me. And so I bought a guitar again and started writing music, and kind of had some people in and out that had helped in the early stages of this band. I made a bunch of terrible. I used to suck to a metronome too, and so I'd write out these guitar parts that were all sloppy. And my buddy Josh, who I don't know, do you remember the band Burden of the Day?
Yeah.
Josh Summers, their guitarist, he played drums on a bunch of their records, and so I'm sure I sent him like a headache of files of guitar, and he was going to help program some drums out so we could work out demos. And then I moved to Arkansas, played with some friends, didn't end up working out, came back to Kansas, and then it's had a few different transitions. And this current lineup, well, I guess like about half this lineup has probably been in the band 2 years now or so. Yeah. It's been like the longest running lineup, but it was basically studio for a while.
Yeah.
And like we self-tracked that first that Colleen record.
Yeah.
Before Josh was in the band, Jeff Sahun, the guitarist for Let Live, did all the mixing. He was like a longtime friend and wanted to like help the band out, and so he did. We just tracked ourselves, and then he did all the extra stuff on it. And then Josh joined the band, and then everything else recorded since then has been with him and I doing, the basically sitting in a room together for hours. So, yeah. But it's been my baby for years. So
that's cool. That's cool. And you just wanted to play guitar and not ever try to take that vocalist mantle?
When on that first record, we had some guys in the band, but I ended up playing just about everything but lead guitar on it and drums, and I did vocals on it.
Okay.
And I'm not a stellar vocalist, although I did vocals in bands in the past. So again, up in Wichita, there's like musicians, but it's like either people have conflicting schedules or availability, and it's like pulling teeth getting people that are consistent. And so we had a guy that was playing guitar when Josh joined the band, and he abruptly had to quit, and we had a CD release show, and it was like, is it easier to teach somebody else guitar, or is it easier to just let somebody fill in on vocals? Like, which one is going to be an easier natural? And our friend, one of our buddies, was like, well, I can learn all, like he was in another band in town. His name is Grant. He's awesome. And he was just like, well, I'll fill in. Like I can learn all the songs for the set. And since I wrote the guitar parts, I was like, well, I already know the guitar. I'll just play guitar. Yeah. And then ever since then I've played guitar.
it was really nice for that CD release show not being the only guitar player.
Yeah. I think I played like 2 shows on bass.
Okay.
Oh,
So
yeah,
like
that's right.
we all kind of like know each other's parts for the most part.
Well, we just want to be like as adaptable as we can be for whatever situation gets thrown at us, you know?
Yeah.
Our bassist Max, well, actually he's actually switching to guitar right now. But he is actually a drummer. He's only played drums in bands, and then ended up playing bass in the band. So it was really weird for a little while because Josh is also a drummer and he played guitar. So we had 2 dudes that didn't play.
Max and I kind of had a similar thing where it's like, oh, we're both drummers because that's how we met. So I've known Max since probably middle school, something like that, because of just playing drums. So it's really interesting knowing him for as long as I have, and then, you know, joining Revisionist, and it's like, oh man, Max is in the band. That's cool. And he's like, yeah, I'm playing bass. I'm like, what? Like, you play drums. I play drums, you know? And he's like, well, you're playing guitar. That's super weird, you know?
We've got a long-term friend who does most of our photography and video content.
Mm-hmm.
He actually came to the studio in Albuquerque with us too. Like, he just came and shot for the week and a half with us. And he's around all the time. And he's not very good with 6 strings, but he rules at bass. And so we were talking about it because we've been a 4-piece for a while. And so our bass player was like, well, I really like him, and if it helps make everybody more stable. So this week he switched to guitar so that we could bring somebody else in to like,
oh man.
So it's like teamwork makes the dream work is the motto. Like, it's just like nobody has it's like we just want to do like have cool stories to tell people when we're older. And it's not like, man, I can't wait to tell you about how cool of a guitarist I am. I want to talk about the cool things that we did.
Yeah.
So nobody really cares what we do in the project. It's just like let's just make it work and be flexible.
It's all, you know, centered around just the collective goal. You know what I mean? It's not like we're a crazy techie guitar band, you know, and I'm just am playing 4/4 on the drums or whatever. Like, it's not any one person's thing. It's the people who are involved because they want to be, and they want to see the collective goal be reached, you know?
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. No ego involved. It's not like I wrote this sick guitar riff and I'm not going to switch to drums or whatever. Like, these are my lyrics and nobody else can sing them because they mean something to me. And like, they don't know.
Even with recording. So like we did that record with Aaron Gillespie, but when we booked the time, we were supposed to record in April of this last year.
Yeah.
And it got pushed back to May, and then it got pushed to July. And then it was like, well, maybe October. And then we got booked for November. And so that's a long time to not get content out.
Yeah.
And Aaron was like, listen, I feel bad because like part of it was like some of his schedule with the pandemic and things going on where he couldn't travel. And so he was like, listen, I have like, let's just do a song remotely and get it out. And so we wrote a song, and we could record everything in our garage in our practice space, but drums. And Aaron was like, well, I have his home studio. I have a studio, not a home studio. He has a studio in his hometown, or not hometown, where he lives in Salt Lake. And so he's like, if you guys can record everything, just send it to me and I'll record drum tracks for you. And like the night that we recorded, I don't remember. I broke my ankle the night that we were recording. I stepped in a hole. We like walked to the gas station and I tripped and broke my ankle. And I was having like a real off night, and Josh has been our drummer for a while. And I could not play to the dang metronome to save my life that night. And so on that single, it's a song called Silent Right that we did a video for and released it over the summer. Josh actually played all the guitar on the recording.
Nice.
So I don't even think, I did some layers that I don't even think ended up making it on the song.
Yeah, I don't know if any of that's on. It's super interesting because it's kind of like, you know, no one cares what anyone does as long as the goal is reached, you know?
Yeah.
And, I think that it was you, Josh, when you were talking to me about it, it's just like, oh, how did you feel about like Aaron doing drums on the single or whatever? I'm like, that'd be rad. Like that, you know, if we could just get a song out, it's content, like, let's do it, you know?
Yeah. As opposed to like, oh, it's not me on the recording or whatever.
Right.
Like, I've got to do it. It's like, I can play all the parts and we're all like working together and we wrote it. So it's like, why throw fits about it? I guess like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, I just want to do cool things with my friends, and it doesn't matter, like, as long as I get to be a part of it. Like,
yeah.
Right.
That's awesome. How'd you guys get hooked up and decided to work with Aaron Gillespie, and what was that experience like?
So we had a sit down as a band, and it was like, well, we thought we actually do a pretty good job of like tracking our own demos out and recording. We recorded ourselves for that first record. But I was talking to the band. I was like, we can go just about anywhere and record. But for me, I wanted like an experience.
Yeah.
Like I wanted something to like, we'd all look back on, and it wouldn't just be us tracking in our house. It seems like so many people the technology's gotten so good that like you can kind of record about anywhere and get a good product out of it if you know what you're doing. And so we made a decision as a band to, like we wanted to just do something that like, it's the thing that not everybody can do. It's something that like it's happening because you're not because everybody can do it. Yeah. If that makes sense. And so I'd reached out to a couple different people, and we actually had talked about recording at God City with Kurt Ballou. And I remember the day I got we were playing in Denver, and we were sleeping at our buddy Jake's house. And I woke up to an email from Kurt Ballou. I'm a huge Converge fan. Yeah. And so I was like, woke Josh up like, oh my God, like, look at this. Like I got an email back to record the band. And so, which is kind of like a mountaintop thing for me. And then we got two other guys that aren't, as involved with like this kind of music. Like some of it, like heavier music, like Max come from like an indie background, and then we was into bands like Fit for a King. And so it's like very different than someone talking about Converge, you know? Yeah. And then the two guys that were in the band were like, oh, well, who's that? When I'm like, I got a response, and they like the demos, and they,
and Josh and I are freaking out about it,
Yeah.
And so, but it was like, man, that would be awesome. But I think it would be more from like an engineering perspective. Like he wanted to engineer the record. I don't know how much it would be like produced. Yeah. If that makes it like, and so I was like, that's awesome though. And then I had my buddy Thomas that I knew from Amarillo. He was in a band called Nevaeh years ago. And he ended up playing guitar in Aaron Gillespie's solo project.
Okay.
Not the Almost, but the
worship one.
The worship
yeah.
record. Yeah. And then some past bands, like Aaron and I have had some like, so basically it was like I wouldn't consider us friends.
Yeah.
But it would be like, hey man, remember me? And then you jog their memory kind of thing. Like, oh yeah, that, the time. And so I was able to like, I found an email. I was able to like track somebody down that had his contact information, and I'd sent information to him the week that we also found out about God City. And about a couple hours after the email got sent, we got a response from him. And it was actually really funny because he said he was interested, and then had the time to do it. And he doesn't produce heavy stuff very often.
Okay.
Like hardly at all, actually. And
it's a lot of most like country and indie stuff, and
and he's been doing a lot of really cool, like some like electronic music.
Okay.
And so, and all of our correspondence was with the email, and it was actually like very natural. But we're talking about sending money to people for recording when you're a band that's like, most heavy bands, it's not like you're rolling in money. You know? And it was actually funny because then I started getting, I was getting messages from an iPhone, like an iCloud number. But it was funny because I never would get a phone call, or if I call it, when I was like, man, I was like, I wonder if I'm getting like catfished by somebody pretending to be like Aaron Gillespie, because it just is one of those things where it's like, he does a lot of really cool things. And so knowing that I still feel like we're just nobody, and so I remember, do you know Alex Hamp from War of Ages?
Yeah.
So him and I, we know each other for years, and he'd actually helped do some management for the band when we first started. And, but I messaged him, and I was like, hey, can you look this phone number up in your phone? He was like what? Like, why? Like, it's like a weird question, but I was like, just look up the number. And he was like, oh, that's Aaron Gillespie's number. Why? And I was like, okay, don't worry about it. I'll call you back later. Like, just because I was like, because we're talking about like, cash app and money to somebody,
Yeah.
And so, we all talked about it with some guys that are younger in the band, and they're so used to like some of that more like produced sound of records today. Is like, I think if we went to Kurt Ballou, I would be just ecstatic. I think Josh would be too, but I wasn't convinced that like everybody would get it.
Yeah.
And I thought that like the Aaron Gillespie thing would be like a really good like bridge at the time. It would be like a good bridge the gap for styles for everybody involved. And then we thought that Aaron would actually produce and he would like bring a new element to the table. So we decided to like, you know, just jump all in and send it and, you know, have him do the record. So it was like kind of back and forth for probably like 3 weeks. And then everybody decided, I think Aaron is the right fit after talking to him and let's give him control. So
what was that like for you, Josh, as a drummer?
Yeah. That was pretty weird at first. It was weird when we kind of made that call because, you know, when we were in Denver and Josh hit me and he woke me up, he was like, dude, like Kurt Ballou wants to do the record. Like I was stoked. And then he was like, oh wait, Aaron Gillespie wants to do the record. And I'm like, oh, that's insane. Like, you know, Under Oath is one of those bands that for me, you know, 11 or 12 years old, like hearing that and being like, oh man, like I want to be a drummer. I want to do music forever, you know? And so with just all of that going on, I remember Josh being like, okay, so we have to prepare for the studio. And I
don't even think you were our drummer at the time. You were still playing guitar.
No, I was still playing guitar.
Oh man.
And then so I was still playing guitar and we had talks. I think, was it you and I, or was it you and our old drummer? And I don't remember who it was, but you and I were still writing quite a bit. And our drummer, he couldn't be at a lot of the writing sessions for one reason or the other. So I would just get on the kit and like write out ideas and parts and stuff, you know? And so we were just like, well, it's that type of thing where it's like, if he can't play it or he can't make it or whatever, then I'll just record drums and guitar or do whatever, you know? And so it was the type of thing for me where it's like, you know, I've never recorded in a studio before. And so Josh is like, okay, we got to get prepared. And I was like, cool. How do we do that? And he was like, I don't know. And I was like, well, what do you mean you don't know?
It's like play to a click and practice over and over and over again.
Yeah. And it was just such a vague thing, but he was like, man, you don't know until you know, which was super frustrating for me. Cause I'm just like, dude, I don't get it. Like, I just need to help figuring it out, you know? And so it was definitely,
it was like so a lot of the guys in the band hadn't really been in like a real studio to record before.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of nerves of like, you know, this is awesome, but it's kind of a big moment. And so it's like, are we just going to like, you know, just make a mess because we're, you know, cause you just never know until you're in it, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and I think that with me personally, like, I think that all of those nerves and stuff of being in a real studio and having this dude produce it and all this other stuff, I think that kind of went away. Because it had been put off so many times due to different circumstances, that if it would have happened when it was supposed to happen the first time, I don't know how I would have acted or reacted. Like it could have been very rough, you know?
Yeah.
But I think having that, what was it, like 7-8 months, something like that, of extra time and working on songs. And, you know, I was playing a bunch of drums to hip hop songs and click track, you know, and just trying to get better. And I don't know what I'm trying to get better at. I'm just trying to get prepared.
I think it was, everybody was really hard on Josh when he took over drums. Cause we're like, Aaron's a drummer. So like, you suck. Like he's like, like he's going to eat you.
He could ride you really hard.
Yeah.
Well, and so we're like,
so we were just so rough on him.
Yeah. I remember being at Josh's every day, just, you know, before I would go to work, just playing drums all the time. And it probably annoyed him and his wife, Katie, so much, but I'm like, well, I gotta get better, you know?
So the Emptiness of Gravity, this new EP, where'd that title come from?
That was me. Have you seen the movie Gravity that has Sandra Bullock? And so we there's a song on the record. So the lyric actually didn't even make it on the record, which is funny. But it was like one of my favorite lines because it was like, we're trying to find the reality and the emptiness of gravity. And it was like, I remember watching that movie years ago, like when it came out, but it really connected with like the content of the song that it was in. And it's like where everything's kind of like spinning out of control. And so often we perceive things like differently than they actually are. I mean, I don't know if you remember that movie, she's hallucinating and everything is going off the rails. And so, it's like sometimes in life, you know, it's like we really lose sight of all the things that are like our minds play tricks on us. Mm-hmm. And so the line was referencing that, you know, I'm trying to find reality in the emptiness of gravity. And so if you don't know the movie, it wasn't very like direct in the lyric. If you know it, it's like, oh, I get it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But that's where it came from. And I think it was like, it really stuck out, I think, with a lot of the overall theme of the record, even though it didn't even make the record. And so I think we had talked about album names and, you know, and we went back and forth on a ton of stuff. And then I think it just kind of stuck. Yeah. And so it was like that, it fits. And so,
yeah. What is the theme of the album?
I think there's quite a few different themes just lyrically throughout the
concept record, but
EP.
Yeah, I think so.
Each song has a different meaning, you know, lyrically anyway.
I think there is like the overarching thing is, so this last couple of years, like the last year and a half or whatever, is pretty hard for everybody in one way or another. And I think it would be silly to think that didn't influence some of the record.
Yep.
And so, but instead of thinking about a lot of specifics and details, it was like, how is this affecting my family? How is it affecting my friend group? Our vocalist, Eric, he runs a business, and it's like, how is this affecting his employees? And, you know, I remember like he took like a half pay cut for almost a year so he could make sure he paid all of his employees. And we have like a little different perspective than you, just because we different spots in life. And so there's a lot of, there was a lot of frustration and anger over the year. And I think, you know, everything's so polarizing right now.
Yeah.
And it's like they're more at each other as opposed to at wanting to be better and grow. You know, it's like we're so content or so focused on changing everyone else around us that we don't really change ourselves. Like we're not working on growing in ourselves. And so there's a lot of theme that kind of, you know, if you know, details that, you know, it's like you could kind of pull back to a lot of, there's a lot of hope in disparity if you just look for it. Yeah. And then, you know, relying on the people around you. And there's a lot of like, kind of like rebirth, like all we got to get to, you know, just get to the end. You know, it's there's a single that we're releasing when the record comes out that called Wasteland Dreams. And it's, you know, it's like where the chorus line repeats that we're in the dust, just make it till dawn. And it's kind of that reference. It's like there's a light at the end of the tunnel if you just like don't stop.
Yeah.
So as cheesy as all that sounds,
this record seems to be like musically, I think, more aggressive but less heavy. Is that intentional or just kind of the nature of different people contributing as opposed to the first record, which was just you?
So Josh, I mean, I don't know.
I think that I think that with Josh and I writing like a lot of the riffs and a lot of the songs and stuff like that, I think that we kind of just write what we want to hear, you know, and it's like, I think there was never
focus on anyone's style.
Like, yeah, I don't think that there was an intent at all to be like, okay, we're going this route, we're going to do this. Like, there was none of that. It was, you know, oh man, I have a sweet riff. Okay, cool. Come to the practice space. Like, so it was all that. And
I'm actually curious this might help with the question. So when you say like more aggressive and less heavy, I'm interested from like an outside perspective, like, or I guess like more clarification, like I guess like how it hit you as a listener, because you got to hear the whole record already.
Yeah. I've heard the whole thing. I mean, it reminded me of certain bands, but it hit me as like this really driving, fast pace, like just in your face, like aggressive record, similar to bands like a Comeback Kid or Take It Back, or like kind of that style of hardcore.
Okay.
As opposed to like when I listen to Culling, it's more chunky, more like that kind of New York aggressive, like tough guy vibe to it.
So
if that makes sense.
Well, no, totally. So it's because it's hard, like, because I'm not necessarily a list, like I know all the parts in and out. And,
Yeah.
like live, we're definitely a live band. Like everything is massive live. So when we went to, we wrote a whole bunch of parts, and like I have a problem where I don't know where to stop riffing. Like I like there's just like riff, and my brain, Josh is the same way. Neither one of us can like stop. It's like we're good at transitions, but it's like there's so much going on that probably the normal listeners like, what is wrong with these idiots? Like, and so when we went to the studio, we had written like 10 songs for the record, and we wrote what we thought could be completed songs, but they were still a little loose.
Yeah.
We just like, we didn't set out to be like, well, I want to be a heavy band, or I want to be a rock and roll band, or I want to be it was just like, let's write parts that work together. And whatever that song becomes, that's what the song becomes.
Yeah.
And when we went to the studio with Aaron, we trusted Aaron. He's the producer. Like we made the decision, and unless it was something crazy out of left field, we were like, we're just going to trust the process.
Yeah.
And so every morning we sat down, and he would take our demo and he would just obliterate it on his computer. He would like cut all the pieces apart on his like Pro Tool or his Logic, and he would like rearrange things. And then all of a sudden, all right, we have all these parts. What are we taking out? What are we leaving? What do we like? And every morning we rewrote the entire song and then would track that. So in previous releases, I would always like, you record all the drums for the record the first day at the beginning, and then you record in layers. And we did that in a much different way. It was like, we would rewrite the song, and it'd be like, there'd be a click track on his computer, and it'd be pieces of our demo. And then it would be just nothing but click in sections. And then there'd be more demo and pieces, and he'd be like mouthing guitar parts, and we'd be like writing with our like him playing drums on his lap with Josh while we're sitting in a living room. And he'd be like, all right, you know what you're doing? And then he would send that file to Ken, the engineer, in the other room, and send Josh off to just play from memory what we just rewrote, never playing all the parts together. And then we would kind of like write as we went, and then we recorded every instrument, and we'd leave that day in the studio with a completed song. And then the next day we would just start another song. Yeah. And each day was affected by the day before. Yeah. Like the vibe and the writing. We didn't even actually keep like, you keep like guitar amps set up, and you keep the same. And every day we rebuilt all of our guitar and bass tone, different guitars, different amps. Like, what is the vibe of today? And so it was actually such a quick process too, that Ken and Aaron are the fastest people I've ever worked with in the studio. And like, there were days where like, we couldn't remember what the song was the day before and what changes. Like we could, if you asked me to, like, while I was in the studio, like, hey, play the song from Monday, I wouldn't be able to play the song all the way through for you, because it was like so quick. And then we weren't even re-listening. It was like, it's done, on to the next thing. Yeah. And so like the last day of the studio, we actually re-listened to the record, and it was like, oh shoot, I completely forgot we did that. And like, we had to come home and like relearn all the songs. We had to, and they were all there. It was still like, 90% of what we brought to the studio. Yeah. But it was so quick and in the moment that we just let the songs like be what they became. Okay.
So I think that actually probably helped us a lot, Josh and I specifically, because like he touched on earlier, we're so kind of crazy with riffing and drum parts and just having everything go at 100 the whole time, And so I think with it going so quick in the studio, there was not a chance for us to stop and overthink about it. And I remember a few times we were in the control room and Kenny has it blasting on the playback super loud, and we're listening to it, and then Josh and I are kind of looking at each other, and we're just like, oh, like, I don't know, maybe we should change that part. And then Aaron's like, no, stop. How does that feel right now? And I'm like, oh, it's dope. And he's like, it's great. It's like, that's, if that's how it vibes, that's how it vibes. It's great. You know, so I think that it being so quick really kind of like forced Josh and I to not overthink it and just go with the process. Like we said,
also,
we would, you know,
trusted Aaron.
Yeah.
Right.
It was like, you take the paintbrush and paint with our paint, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, it's hard because I think as musicians, we get ego involved. We've already kind of addressed that. Like none of us care. We just want to see it become something cool. And sometimes it's like, that's where innovation comes in. It's where you bring other people and where the creativities overlap. And then that's where you innovate and you create new things. And we just wanted to like create an identity rather than plain things we felt like we've been influenced by. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, but I feel like the first record was just like a cool, busy, riffy, heavy record. Mm-hmm. And this feels like Revisionist. Like it feels like it's developing a fingerprint, and it's just an EP. And we only got like 8 days in the studio with Aaron. And we were worried that we weren't even going to be able to track properly. Like it's like everything's you know, going on. The relationship could suck. We didn't even know, like, you know, Aaron might suck to work with, you know, it's like one of those things like, you know, is this just all going to be just a mess? And we actually today confirmed Aaron to produce our full length in the fall.
Nice.
And it was something that I think if we had more time, we would have more time to develop. And we're learning to make it heavier with space and dynamic as opposed to just riff and heavy. And so, we're going to take what we're doing now and take it down further, like down that road of building what is our identity. And we don't really know right now because you just, you know,
that's
it's
kind
so
of
hard
fun though.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun though, to kind of like figure that out. It's definitely frustrating at times, but I think that's kind of cool because it's like, man, you can do whatever you want, you know, but yeah, it'll be interesting.
I know we got off on a tangent, but I was really interested, like how you perceived it, you know, like,
no, I really like it. It was just interesting to go back and listen to Culling and then to hear like, all those various factors that go into the record. But it was like the sound it's so subtle. It's like the band is still heavy all the time, but it's like these subtle shifts where like, if you listen to the music, if I played it for my wife, she'd be like, yeah, it's all the same shit, right? Like,
well, and there's like riffs that didn't make it on Culling that made it in some of our writing sessions now. And probably any of the riffs in themselves could go on either record.
Yeah.
It's how we put them together on this one. And I think it's maturing and learning how to use each other better. And like Eric, our vocalist now, who actually also started playing guitar in the band, switch to vocals. Like all of us do all of, you know, but he's a better vocalist than I am. Like he's so much better. And so, you know, and I mean, it's just wild, but like he's better. And so he's got some more smoothness to him and he can sing, you know, and there's other aspects that's like, we wanted to dive in and try, but if you're not going to be able to do it at 100%, why put it on the record? Because if everything else is 100%, but two parts of song are at 60, then your song's only 60% good. You know, like, so don't do what you can't do. And so I think Culling was like, and I was the one that wrote all of that. I didn't have someone else that was like really like inputting on the writing side, except for our old drummer, you know, helped a lot with like the percussive side, but like the musical side of it. And so with this one, it's like Josh and I worked together. We worked with Aaron and we learn more dynamics and we have better musicians, like as not musicians, but like our vocalist is better. It makes a drastic difference. You know, our bassist Max, he graduated as a percussion major and majored doing like jazz stuff. And he plays all instruments. And he's like, doesn't write structure, but he comes in and paints the house once we frame it.
Yep.
He understands so much more about music than Josh and I do. We're both idiots. And so, but like, we all know our roles and everyone's okay with what we do, you know? And so I think we actually, you know, hopefully it's a more musical record, you know, is the goal.
I think that's a fair statement and a self-assessment of it. Yeah. I'd say that. Yeah. Cool. So you guys are self-releasing this EP?
Yes.
Yep, we are.
Awesome. So
We actually have a video and single coming out tomorrow on Outburn is putting it out.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
So we got another video that we're really excited about that we shot. And it's like a much heavier. So the first single was that Half Moon song. Mm-hmm. And that was like the throw everybody for a loop, not out of our normal wheelhouse vibe. Yeah. That was a song we actually wrote entirely in the studio with Aaron.
We took the chorus of that song. Yeah. Like one part.
We had a completely
different song.
Oh, wow.
We had another song that was like a ripper song. And Aaron was like, I like parts A and it's like, think of it as like an ABC. He's like, I like part A and C and I like B, but B doesn't fit with A and C. So we can make another ripper song, or we can take B out and just write an entire new song around B. And we were like, man, shoot, when are you going to get an opportunity to write a record or write a song with Aaron Gillespie from?
Yeah.
So even if it was like, because I actually really, really like where the song that we took it out of might actually make the full length because we actually really like the song. But it was like, well, shoot, let's just see where this is going to take us, you know? Yeah. And so, but yeah, this next song is like probably one of my favorite songs on the record because Josh is, it's like my favorite drum song on the record. So it's a pretty intense song. And so I'm really excited about it coming out tomorrow.
That's cool. Yeah. That's rad. So you already said you've confirmed time to work with Aaron in the fall. You're kind of releasing this EP at the early beginning stages of post-pandemic America anyways. What's the future looking like for you guys? What else do you have planned outside of just getting back into the studio?
It looks like we're playing Audio Feed in September.
Oh, nice.
We were actually booked like pandemic time Audio Feed, and then they're going to have us come back. So we got a couple shows that are like that's coming up. There's this some friends of ours do drift racing, and they also are like semi-pro BMX riders too, and they've got this like. So when we got a phone call about playing this BMX jam, and it was like they called and I was like, man, this sounds ridiculous. Like it sounded like a terrible house party, you know? Yeah. And then they were like, no, we got video. We'll show you. And it's like an hour out in the middle of nowhere, like an hour and a half or hour from where we live. And there is more like ridiculous, it's hard to explain. It's like Fantasy Factory out in the middle of nowhere. It's all outside.
It's crazy.
And they have like 200 people show up to this like weird barbecue firework backyard blow stuff up and so it was like, how do you pass that up? Like it's it's like, so we're gonna do something with that. And then there's as touring comes back up, we had actually started booking tour before the pandemic. Like we canceled a whole bunch of shows. So we are an active band that's ready to go play.
All right.
And we all have jobs that we actually can travel and do what we need to do. My wife and I have worked from home for the last 2.5 years already. Our vocalist runs a business, and so he works from the road all the time too. And so we're actually a very fortunate band we can leave and not have to do the like we can actually work our jobs the whole time we're gone.
Oh, that's awesome.
And our new bass player works at the same company that we work for. So we're really like able to help each other and, make sure that it's like a stable thing. So it's like, we actually get to play music for fun instead of all the stresses and the,
making it work financially.
Grind, 300 days a year. Yeah.
So the goal is to be out as much as possible. And there's some talks of some really cool support dates that I can't talk about, but if they do, it'd be kind of a dream come true. And so we're just really, really fortunate. Like we got some cool things going on. We have a live session we did in Austin at this really rad place called the Noise Factory that we released 1 or 2 songs off, but the whole session is going to come out about a month after the record comes out. And so there's we've really been trying to just develop content so people are, got something to have some interest in.
We'll fight for peace.
The only thing that I do want to say before I get off here is, so one thing that we really push is community. Mm-hmm. I know that you grew up around like the music scene and stuff, right, Brian? Like you've been doing this forever. Yeah. And it seems like music is like so much less camaraderie. Like there's less like working together, and then also being like really pumped on all your talented friends. Yeah. And so we've been really blessed to, we got some networking that, so like locally there's a band called Parallax that we play a lot with, and they're like one of the hardest working bands that we're around all the time. And so if, I don't know if you remember bands like the Handshake Murderers, if you remember, so they're like very like Handshake Murderers-esque vibe, which is awesome because you don't get that anymore. Yeah. And then, there's some of our friends it's a band called Conning Sore from Austin, and it's like a more pissed off, like heavier Dance Gavin Dance. And we show trade, and like, there's a handful of friends that are like, we're all working together, and it's really cool to see some of that camaraderie and bands that are like, maybe like above like our station. There's this, where are you from, Brian? What area?
I'm from DC.
Okay, because I thought you were East Coast. So yeah. But there's some friends of ours that are like it's from the Carolinas. It's a band called Violent Life, Violent Death. I don't know if you remember Stained Glass Romance. Yeah. Their vocalist is in that band. Oh, cool. And so we're always like group chats and like trying to share it's because it's like teamwork makes the dream work. And so it's something that we're really excited about with some of the stuff we got coming up with working on shows and tours is like trying to bring back a lot of like fellowship. Yeah. Like support, it's not always a competition. Yeah. So, but yeah, so listen to Conning Sore and Parallax and Violent Life, Violent Death. They're all way cooler than we are. So. Right.
Thanks for listening to As the Story Grows. Our theme song was written and composed by the legendary Bob Nana. If you like what you hear, subscribe on iTunes and give the show a rating and review. If you'd like to support the show financially, click on the Patreon link at asthestorygrows.com. If you enjoyed this episode, share it on social media with your friends. Much appreciated, and thanks for listening.
I never felt so young.